There you go. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here on behalf of myself and Dr. James Irvine. Dean, thank you. Dean's in attendance. I looked around the room. For one, Mayor Thomas is fine because I've been called worse. And second of all, surrounded by very intelligent people, so I will try to act and elevate to that game. So it is a pleasure to be here. We are presenting our socioeconomic impacts in the modern era of uranium mining in Northern Saskatchewan. As the presentation goes on, I'll start off with a little bit of the history of community vitality, how the project came to existence. Dr. James Irvine will do some of the data analysis and some of the insights that we came up with, and I'll conclude with some of the recommendations that have taken place during the report. At any time, if you feel you have a question, I know it's reserved towards the end, but if you feel the question is imperative throughout the process, feel free to ask us and we can address that at the time. Maybe there's a... There we go. So a little bit about the committee. Community Vitality actually originates from the Joint Provincial Federal Panel on Uranium Mining. So for example, if Arriva and Cameco want to exist to add, they have to actually participate in a program where they're assessing the socioeconomic indicators on communities. So in this whole process, there are representatives of three distinct groups: industry, government, and population health. So Dr. James Irvine represents the population and Northern Health Authorities, and he's the chairperson. Richard Gladue and Glenn LaFleur of Arriva Resources have been on the committee. Presently, they're changing people that represent Arriva, but Arriva has a big stake on the committee. VP Gary Morasti and Darwin Roy of Cameco Corporation, Scott Boys and Warren Kelly of Ministry of Government Relations. I do have to add that this committee seems a little bit male top heavy, which it is. We since had Caroline Inglis McQuaid from Arriva actually come onto the committee. It's imperative that we have a good representation, both male, female, and different backgrounds, so we are addressing that at the committee level. And myself, I started on with Community Vitality in 2011. After teaching a semester at one of the schools, the opportunity came up for Community Vitality, and since then it's been an awesome learning curve, and I do have to express my thanks to the committee members. So like I said, it was a recommendation of the joint panel. Surface leases agreements require the companies to actually take part. It focused on the social well-being and quality of life of community residents, and it took direction from Northern stakeholders. Throughout any actual project that Community Vitality has embarked upon, it's very instrumental to have Northern input as we go forward. Without Northern input, the projects aren't realistic and aren't achievable in the communities they were supposed to serve. The initial direction was identified in 1999 and included environment and land, health, economic, social, and infrastructure, communication dynamics and relationships. Special topics also included youth, out-migration, and poverty, which are still relevant today and still need to be approached and looked at. So just a little brief on previous projects. As you can see the list, and I won't go through the total list, there are numerous projects that Community Vitality has taken upon and continue to be in existence to this day. As you look down towards the very bottom, the Northern Saskatchewan Migration Survey, in 2000, Community Vitality wanted to address the people outflux of Northerners working in the industry and wanted to highlight what was going on and what could be done differently. So if you have any time to actually go onto the website, please do, as those are still valuable reports that can be used in any further academic projects, and we're more than willing to continue addressing any issues that may stem from that. Health food cost assessment in 2001 was conducted by Community Vitality, and this study is actually still in existence today, done by the Population Health Unit. Community Vitality provided the vehicle, and it was taken on by an additional resource and continues to be in function today. Many of you, just a scan of hands, have anyone heard of the actual healthy food cost assessment? There's one, there's two. So, very valuable document and continues to be in effect. And finally, the impact on families and communities of flying out work rotation system. As you know, in the mine schedule, prior schedules had people away from their communities longer durations. Community Vitality took on the initiative to study what was the best rationale for having people work in and out, as well as what were some of the improvements done to them. And from that, actually, Arriva and Cameco have implemented, for example, cell phone towers in their mine sites and different initiatives, making sure that there's the continued link with their community and families for people that work in the industry. There goes fancy highlight there, so just to stress my points. Perhaps must be a battery issue. Not powered by uranium. Thank you. So moving on to the actual report document. When I came on in 2011, the committee had decided that we need to take an approach to look back at the mandate of community vitality. It was decided that there hasn't been an actual study for numerous years to actually study the impacts of the socioeconomic indicators and related issues on northern communities. So I'll click over here. We can click. Perfect. So in 2011 in August, we had a call for proposals, and Intergroup Consultants was selected. Now Intergroup is a company that works across northern Canada and had some great insight into northern communities as well as northern industry. Once we selected Intergroup, we sat down as a community vitality committee and felt what was the next step that we have to take and who do we want to bring to the table in order to make sure that this is an effective study that needs to take place. So from that, an expanded steering committee was helped to direct the project. Some of these names are recognizable, but I will go through the list because they were actually very instrumental in making sure the project moved ahead. Anne Robillard represented Hatchet Lake. Clifford Ray represented Sandy Bay. Dr. Rose Roberts, who was with NEDA, originally from Stanley Mission and in Prince Albert. Her Worship Georgina Jolibois of La Loche, Rosalina Smith of Pine House, Sandra Hansen of Stony Rapids, Scott Robertson of Orange, and Jim Andrews of Cameco and Caroline Inglis McQuay of Arriva provided additional insight. So the purpose of the study was to identify the socioeconomic impacts, both beneficial and otherwise, of the modern era of uranium mining on Northern Saskatchewan. The study reviewed socioeconomic effects that could be attributed and both influenced. And of course, as we move through the study, there's a slide that indicates it's very difficult to study the exact socioeconomic impacts of one industry on communities, as there are a lot of factors within communities that dictate the well-being of the community. In addition, socioeconomic and population conditions were examined to help understand the context of Northern Saskatchewan during the period being examined. So the study in essence involved one, review of other published reports and documents, review of data collected by other agencies, review of data provided by industry, review of other community vitality projects by other industries, of course getting that comparison of what this industry is doing compared to other industries in Northern Canada, and finally key person interviews in 4 case study communities. Although it was only 4 case study communities based on the scope of the project, it wasn't viable to go out furthermore, but we do understand moving on select recommendations of future, expansion of the project that we need to go into additional communities and get additional interviews from people. So there are some other studies that were pulled and as well research was gathered from, including Saskatchewan Educated Indicators Report and the 2011 Northern Socioeconomic Benefits Summary. Highlight the communities and mines in Northern Saskatchewan. As many of you know, mines are operating in the Athabasca region. However, the 4 communities that we chose based on the geographic and demographics in Northern Saskatchewan included Cumberland House and Cumberland House Cree Nation, La Ronge, Air-Ronge, and the Lac La Ronge Indian Band, La Loche and Clearwater Dene Nation, and of course up north Hatchet Lake and Wollaston Lake representing the Athabasca, where the majority of the mining is taking place. And there's just a brief overview of actual uranium mining in Northern Saskatchewan, and I will now turn it over to Dr. Irvine. Is there any questions before we actually get into the meat of the report? Perfect, thank you.
Well, thanks, Thomas. So as Thomas mentioned, we had community representatives help ground us in a lot of the work that was done in terms of what was looked at and how it was looked at. The one unique thing about this industry is that many times when you're considering benefits, of other industries. They're often dealing with one community close at hand. Whereas this was dealing with the northern half of the province. So what we wanted to do was to look to see what the positive and negative impacts were in a lot of the social determinants, basically the social determinants of population health, community health, and individual health. So we tried to look at what impact mining may have had, but also put it in context of what's going on across the north as a whole. Okay. So the one thing that is fairly important with many of our indicators is our population change. In 1982, the population of Northern Saskatchewan was about 25,000. Now it's over 40,000. So during a period of time where Saskatchewan was basically stable, or at times even decreasing in population, the north is only growing. The population in the north, the birth rate in the far north is about 3 times that of the provincial average, and in other parts of the north it's double. So if we looked at that population pyramid, we can just go back to that other arrow. Yeah, it's working. Oh, good. Just rub the batteries right there. Thanks. So this basic population pyramid, the young population at the bottom, the elders at the top. The dark lines represent provincial population. The orange and blue represent male and female northern population. So you can see that certainly in the north there's a lot fewer elders and a very broad base of young people. So even if our birth rate stays the same or even decreases, the cohort is going to be moving into that age group of having babies. It's going to continue our population growth. So that is one issue that we need to watch as it relates to some of our other indicators. We want to take a look at what impact it's had on employment, and certainly the group of employable individuals across the north has expanded significantly. Growth is 5 times that of the provincial rate, and the labor force has basically doubled during this time period. So if we look at the employment as a whole, not just mining, but employment in general across the north, it's basically doubled. The number of people employed across the north has doubled during the period of 76 to 2006. But with that growth in population and that increase in that group in employment, the employment rate has basically remained static. So the employment rate across the north is still 40% versus 64% in the province as a whole. So if you look at this is a graph showing the people particularly employed in mining itself. The green line shows the increase in numbers of people directly employed by the companies in the Riva and Canada at the mine sites. So it's gone from about 600 up to about 1,800. And the blue line shows the proportion or the numbers of people who are employed as residents of Northern Saskatchewan. So it's gone from, click that twice, yes, yeah, it's gone from about 200 to 830 people employed directly by those two companies. If you add the other people who are long-term contractors working at that site, you double that. So it's about 1,700 people across the north employed in mine sites. The gold bars or the orange bars represent the proportion of the workforce of the residents of North Saskatchewan. So you can see that it's gone from sort of 35% to 37% up to about 47%, and has remained static or even gone down. So the goal of the industry, based on some of the discussion with the panel, is to try to reach 67%. So it's still at that 46%. So there's been a marked increase in the numbers of people employed, but still haven't reached the goal. So the other thing is that the employment in various communities varies. Some communities there's a lot of employment from the industry. Other communities less so, often it's related to skilled labor force in that area. This is showing some of the changes in the workforce by various positions at the mining sites. And it shows the blue is the residents of Northern Saskatchewan, whereas the teal color there is other people employed from either other parts of the province or outside the province. And it gives you some indication of where the room for expansion of residents of Northern Saskatchewan is employment. There's a lot of employment in the equipment operation, underground, mill operation, support services. And there's been improvements in things like trades, managers, and technical, but there's still a lot of room for growth as residents of Northern Saskatchewan in those areas. And those are the ones that require more education situations, the trades technical. We also looked, or we had to look at the residents of Northern Saskatchewan in advanced positions. And if you look at the absolute number, there's been a substantial increase in the number of people moving into managerial supervisor positions, going from 125 to over 300. But as a percentage of the workforce, it's saying we're actually going down. So one of the recommendations that come from this is that additional work to be done on looking at some of the barriers for workers' movement into supervisory and managerial positions. So next to employment is the education. Those two go hand in hand. And this just looks at the educational attainment over a period of time from census. And we ask you to ignore the 2001 data, because during that year, census had used a different indicator. So this is educational attainment for those over the age of 15. Orange being high school certificate, blue being apprenticeship and trades, and then green university degree. So you can see there's a marked increase in the number of apprenticeships and trades certificates, as well as an increase in high school as well as university. So in terms of absolute numbers, a marked increase in the number of educators. If we look at the percentage of the population with that degree of school equivalency, you can see there has been an increase throughout this shows you comparisons of percentage with the province as a whole. So the gap between the north and the province as a whole during this time period, even with this marked increase in numbers of high school graduates and apprenticeships and university education, the gap remains the same as it was in 1976. So industry does contribute fairly significantly to high school, career development, trades, university scholarship training, and apprenticeships. There's certainly a marked increase in the apprenticeships available. And though industry hasn't met its target of 67%, it does continue to look for new ways of trying to improve those statistics. So this isn't, these graphs, the next couple graphs aren't in the report, but there's a description of it. We thought it would be important to show. This shows information from the Ministry of Education, or Education Indicators. And it just shows transition from grade 7 to grade 10. And so it does show that in the north, the green, moving the percentage of youth going from grade 7 to grade 10 is about 68%, whereas in urban Saskatchewan it's close to 95%. So there's some work to be done there. The next one shows the same transition from grade 1 to grade 3. And this shows that the challenges are at an earlier age as well. And the final one is using the Early Developmental Index or the School Readiness Index to show that even at kindergarten age, there's challenges that we face. So even though industry is in high school, we are faced with other challenges earlier on as well. So in the education recommendations, we did include this need to focus somewhat more on early childhood education. So industry partnering with the Ministry of Education and others within the province already doing some work in this area, but also looking at ways by which they can use some of their community contributions to assistance. Looked at the need to focus on transition programs from schools in the north to university in the south, evaluate present urgent programs, looking at multi-party training program, what has worked, what has worked well, and what we can build upon. And then the whole area of increasing career counseling services within the schools. The economy. Certainly there are contributions from industry to the economy. There's direct royalties, and then there's the taxes to government. There's also all those indirect contributions through local tax and income tax. And then the donations and scholarships. So in the year 2011, it's about 1.7 million that went to northern communities. And that's been up and down, but fairly close to that level over the last years. The wage of the average resident of North Saskatchewan employed at 9 cents, about $77,000. So that's a fairly significant salary. And in the community consultations with the key informants, they felt that, or a number of them felt that it's a great stabilizer to the economy in places like Kansas. This graph here, the orange bar, shows the total wage for the province as a whole, the total contributions in terms of wages to the province. And the blue shows the contributions to northern Saskatchewan. So you can see both have been increasing, though over the last years there's been kind of a flattening a little bit of the residents in northern Saskatchewan. And that's where this initiative with the race to education is so important. So the other thing is, if we put that in context, 1,700 jobs, fairly good paying jobs, if we then look at what's happening as the north as a whole, not particularly directly related to the mainland in the south, but all the other industries and other contributions. And if we look at sort of the equivalent dollars for inflation, that if we look at the average and median household incomes across the north, they've actually gone down. So even though provincially there's been an increase. So the gap between the north and the south in terms of average median incomes has been increasing. So So median household income in the north has actually decreased 14% if you consider inflation. Relative to the provincial median income going up by 11%. So even though that substantial number of jobs increase the salary, we're still facing it. The other area that the group looked at was greening industry development opportunities. And I think there's a couple surprises here that certainly there's a lot of development, more than business, that they develop very significant technical capacity. And they're working in other sectors other than in uranium mining itself. So there's some diversification. The other thing that I found more surprising to what the panel had predicted was that it was more sophisticated, it was larger, multi-stakeholder partnerships, multi-community ownership. And if we looked at the industry contracts across the north, they grew from 23 million in 1985 to 464 million in 2011. If we look at the resource revenues to the province as a whole, royalties, it's about 145 million, give or take each year, sort of going up and down depending on So there's a number of different recommendations that came from that. One is the idea of sharing more completely some of the information with northern communities as it relates to the revenues, the transfers to the north, the payments to government from uranium mining compared to other resources as well, comparing it to oil, gas, potash, and so on. And then looking at how community investment funds are being spent or by mining. Is there a better way of supporting community development, community vitality through the donations that mining companies make? So in a number of other sections of the report, we looked at worker health in general based on some of the other studies that have been done. Local participation, community well-being, and community vitality. If we looked at the uranium industry worker health, one indicator was looking at workplace injuries, and they're lower than many other industries, including the healthcare sector and work sites in the province. We've got a few graphs to show that. The other thing is that the exposures to radon, which has been a concern in uranium mining for decades, the exposures are markedly lower than they have been in the past. And you just show some information on that as well. So this just shows some information from workers' compensation. This compares all underground hard rock mines, all open pit mines with uranium. So uranium is included in the other ones, the way the workers' compensation data is available. This shows the percentage or the number of injuries per 100 full-time equivalent employees. And so you can see with uranium mining, slightly lower than regular hard rock mining. And then the next graph. This just shows a comparison with other industries. And we wanted to look at time loss injuries, but also at injuries just that occur even without time loss. Industry does a good job of, if people are injured at work, they often find them other employment that they can do. Other industries may not have that capacity so much. But this shows in terms of the numbers of injuries, the percentage of injuries. You can see commercial, industrial, construction, transportation, health authorities, and healthcare, and then underground hard rock mining, and then open pit mining down there. Even municipalities have a higher injury rate. So it just puts it into perspective a little bit more. And certainly none of these injuries are used acceptably. So I think all the industries need to be working for. Just a little bit in terms of a synopsis of some of the information that's available in the report as it relates to exposures. There have been mine worker epidemiologic studies with the older mines, the Beaver Lodge mine, Uranium City, and otherwise. And then there's been some feasibility studies for the water. I just wanted to show some of the issues. Shows the range of health regions in terms of the percentage of homes that have been screened to be above certain levels of radon in the homes. And the red line sort of shows by health region the percentage of those homes that are above 200 becquerels per cubic. You see there's a broad range of it throughout the province. And throughout Canada, it tends to be higher prairie areas. The north is sort of second, far left there. But it shows just a broad range of exposures that people can have within their own homes throughout the province. And if you think of about 100 becquerel per cubic meter, it means that it would be exposed to about 1.7 sieverts. And really sieverts through a year. So if we look at that broad range of exposures to people in their homes, their lifetime exposure to radon works out to be around 22 working double months. But there's a broad range of exposures to those individuals, depending on the home you're in. And that can be based on your geology in your area, also the type of home you have, the type of ventilation. If you add mining exposure to the average miner, you can see that the exposure is really within that same range. So it puts it into a very different context in terms of exposures today in mine sites relative to mines of yesterday. So I think it's still very important to emphasize that worker health and safety, radiation exposure, physical exposure, but also the whole area of worker wellness programs. If you look at smoking levels within uranium mines, that additive effect or multiplicative effect between smoking and radon, the cardiovascular disease, diabetes that we're seeing in the industry has played a role in worker wellness programs, but we're encouraging them to continue and continue to make improvements in those areas. Turn it back to
So part of the study was to actually examine the local participation of the uranium industry. Of course, with any industry moving into a select area, it's vital that communication with the residents of that area is done in the foremost manner. So basically, we looked at what's currently in place, and local participation in the industry currently includes the Environmental Quality Committee, which is representation of communities, both First Nations and non-First Nations communities in Saskatchewan. Athabasca Working Group, comprised of Athabasca communities, and of course it's industry-led engagement, which involves anything from Northern Tour going into communities to anytime there's an open house, just to give the information to the public. So public involvement extends from inform to collaborate, depending on the type of activity. So as we go through the actual scale of public participation, you can see through the steps. So depending on the project and how instrumental it is to the community, the companies may go in for an informal session or actually go in and have some collaborative effects. Now, of course, we spoke to industry, and industry always wants to continue that approach and are looking forward to actually furthering that approach in terms of communication. So we look forward to see what industry actually does in the next 5 to 10 years. So one of our recommendations was in the study that the province and the uranium mining industry should explore ways to increase community awareness of benefits of mining to communities. Many communities felt they were aware that good things were happening, however they weren't sure how. And of course there was always that perception, well, why do some benefits go to the south and not to the north? And of course that's for the companies to go into the communities and explain what their criteria is for donations and scholarships, and also investment dollars in that community. The uranium mining industry should explore ways to ensure that the public receives information in response to questions and concerns that have been raised in communities. It's vital when you do go on a fact-finding mission that the questions are actually recorded, and many Northerners had felt that their answers weren't given back to them. So of course that's very vital if you're actually doing the public consultation process. And of course for us as Community Vitality, that's something important. All the questions we receive about from anything from industry to actual community wellness, we try to get the answers back to the people that are asking. The uranium industry should undertake continuous improvement regarding how to engage communities, and the uranium mining industry should explore ways for communities in the vicinity of uranium mining development to have meaningful involvement in project planning. If you're part of the process from day one, you're more likely to either support or have the questions necessary and the information than actually being involved later on in the process and not feeling that you're actually part of it. So General Community Wellbeing Index. The Community Wellbeing Index indicated that scores were higher in Saskatoon, and we provided Saskatoon as a baseline to look at the scores, Orange and Larange, and other case study communities in the north as a whole. So Orange with a lot of essential services that are provided in many southern communities fared well better than communities that did not. Disparity in community well-being is widening over time, and that's concerning, especially for our aspect of community vitality, but for any industry that goes in or any type of service provided, especially with that continued widening. So as you can see, it's in the actual report document that you can actually see it better. However, if you look up on the scores, Larange and Orange are the higher points as compared to Saskatoon, which is on the far left. And of course, there are numerous communities that you can look in the report and actually find, and their scores relative to time. So this is important. As a mayor, I'm always interested to see what industry is playing part in our community and types of people that are employed and how many actual people of that population are employed in the industry. So I can speak to Larange and Orange that 9.2% of my population are directly involved in the industry. So without that industry, we're looking at 10%. Orange is a little bit higher at 11%, so obviously you can't combine those numbers, but if you were, that's a substantial amount of individuals that are employed in the industry. And without the industry spin-off, that's another great percentage. So it is a significant contributor to the economic well-being of our region. And I do want to stress back to that point before I forget, some communities, for whatever reason, regardless of their actual location, had a better opportunity to provide workers, and that was based on skill development, based on education levels of their community, and then going out to actually get the positions and being in a position where history has been collected of employees from that community. Cumberland House, Pine House are examples of those communities that have a long-standing relationship with industry and continue to move forward, getting a higher percentage of members, which is vital to other communities to follow suit. So, industry contributions to community vitality. What is that? Well, it's important investments into infrastructure and community services. Because of industry, northern roads, northern infrastructure, there has been a contribution to those. And of course, some communities would like to see additional dollars in infrastructure. Second of all, economic benefits accrued largely to individuals and their families. Individuals are reaping the benefits of being employed, and hopefully that's signifying that overall wellness of their community and their family are being increased. So in terms of recommendations, the uranium mining companies should look for ways to improve the effects with instruments over which they have control. So anything that the industry is actually capable of controlling, they should look at. And that's an area that the companies have admitted that they are looking at and feel that they need to put additional research into. A multi-stakeholder process should explore initiatives to keep Northerners in the north. Now, these could include tax incentives by government, uranium mining industry incentives for Northerners to live and work in the north, and provincial and federal support for low-interest mortgages to address housing, crowding, a key issue. In some of the interviews that were conducted, of course, as life gets better and you are employed, you do want to provide for your family and have an adequate place to live. But many communities, as we all know, are facing those shortages. My community is no different. And of course, that's an issue that needs to be addressed. And finally, community vitality should explore the feasibility of developing an index to monitor community vitality based on the types of data provided through Statistics Canada. Currently, we had actually a committee meeting probably about a week ago, and we are starting the process of figuring out what's the best way to approach this and which way can we go. Of course, with the long form census being a little bit different now, coming up with that systemic way of finding the data will be imperative to the process. So in closing, the uranium industry has contributed significantly to community vitality. That's no surprise. However, there remain substantial socioeconomic disparities between northern Saskatchewan and the province. There are high expectations of the uranium mining industry in northern Saskatchewan, and the uranium mining industry is well positioned to make major contributions to community vitality, as they have in the past, with the right partners on the right initiatives. So as we go into a question discussion, I do want to stress this is a brief overview of the 180 pages of the report. We are more than willing to go out to individual groups at the university, as well as anyone that's representing a corporation or company, willing to share the data. And of course, our website is indicated there. We're always available for questions. We look forward to the dialogue that we can have.